Good afternoon. My name is Akiko Takesue, Bishop White Committee Associate Curator of Japanese Art and Culture here at the Royal Ontario Museum. I'm delighted you could join us for today's Curator conversation. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the Rome sits on the ancestral lands of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabeg Nation, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, since the immemorial time to today. Today's program celebrates the most beautiful and enduring signs of spring, the cherry blossoms, annual bloom of cherry blossoms or Sakura, which has a unique place in the spring rituals of many cities, Toronto included. This afternoon, my colleague, botanist Deborah Metzger and I will explore the art and science of Sakura. Welcome, Deb.
Thank you. Thank you, Akiko. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to the Consulate General of Japan in Toronto, who initially suggested encouraging us to hold a public program on Sakura, cherry blossoms. Thank you very much for your wonderful suggestion. So now, as mentioned, the season of cherry blossoms is coming soon here in Toronto. And I hope some of you have visited Hyde Park in Toronto, Royal Botanical Garden in Burlington, or other locations to view the cherry blossoms, maybe in Vancouver. I imagine that for some of you, it may have become a favorite annual event in the spring. But it's not only in Toronto or Canada. Cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C., for example, are also very famous. And the Cherry Blossom Festival is a national event and celebrated on a grand scale. And of course, in Japan, blooming of cherry blossoms or Sakura is something everyone is waiting for every year. Here are some images from this year's Sakura in Japan. On your left, it's a big weeping Sakura from Fukushima. And on your right, it's cherry blossoms in Tokyo on April 4th. And for your reference, Sakura in Japanese is written this way by hiragana, and also this is a Chinese character for Sakura. So there are many different kinds of cherry blossoms, which Deb is going to tell us in a minute. But in general, you find single petaled on your left and double petaled Sakura. And in this woodblock print from Rome's collection, the artist Utagawa Hiroshige, a famous artist from the Edo period, depicted the double-petaled Sakura in a very detailed manner. So later in the program, I will show more prints depicting Sakura from our collection and some objects as well. But first, let me introduce the history of cherry blossoms in Toronto and DC. Both are from the gifts from Japan. So in DC, it was 1912, 3,000 trees were donated by the mayor of Tokyo to the city of DC. And again, in 1965, 3,000 more trees were given. And in Toronto, it was 1959, 2,000 trees were donated by the citizens of Tokyo to the city, and out of which hundreds of trees were planted in Hyde Park. And more recently, there was a Sakura project from 2002 to 2012, in which 3,082 Sakura trees were planted, donated, and then planted in 58 locations, such as parks, universities, and gardens across the province of Ontario. So these are the ones you see, in Ontario. Today, the custom of cherry blossom viewing, flower viewing in Japanese, it's called Hana-mi. Again, it's written in this way, Hana-mi in Chinese character. And it's very, very, very popular, as you know. But in Japan, it was not new. This custom became popular around 1,000 years ago in the Heian period as an elegant pastime of the nobility. And by the 17th century, all the Japanese, regardless of their background, began enjoying sakura viewing in the spring. So for example, in this print, again by Hiroshige, you can see people strolling under the blooming tree, sakura trees. And here, people are enjoying tea at the outdoor cafe while viewing sakura. Actually, in Japan, Hana-mi or flower viewing involves eating and drinking, as you can see in this photo taken today. And families and groups of colleagues or friends get together and enjoy the time under the blossoming tree. And sometimes the banquet goes on until the night, and viewing sakura in the night is another way to enjoy the flower. So this is a brief introduction. So let's turn the mic to Deb and learn about the science of sakura.
Thank you, Akiko. So Sakura belongs to the genus Prunus, which is a member of the rose family, Rosaceae. And there are many, many different kinds of Prunus. In fact, there are 200 or more species and many hundreds more hybrids and cultivars, also, all of which have been bred for specific characteristics. Prunus is a temperate species. It grows primarily in temperate regions of the world, though there are a few tropical and mountainous species, and it's mostly of old world origin in China, Korea, Japan, Europe, and other areas, even North Africa. But it's not just cherries. It actually encompasses within the genus Prunus cherries, plums, almonds, apricots, and peaches. And if we look at the characteristics, the 5-petaled flowers is actually a familial character. This is something that is common in all members of the rose family. The flowers are often borne on small spur shoots off the sides of branches. And the fruit in Prunus, this is a characteristic of this particular genus, is what we call a stone fruit. This is a plum that you may recognize and think similarly of cherries or peaches or apricots. And the fruit is derived from the ovary of the flower. And in this, which botanists call a drupe, the inner wall of the ovary becomes stony and creates what we think of as the pit, which then encloses the seed. And these are the characteristics that are true of all of the members of the genus Prunus. Next slide, Akiko, please. So there are actually 12 species of Prunus that are found in Ontario. 5 of them are native to the province. The others are cultivated or introduced species that have been brought here from other parts of the world. And I've divided them up here according to the shapes of their fruit and flower clusters. So on the left, we have black and choke cherry, and pin cherry actually has single flowers, but black and choke cherry both have these long elongate clusters or racemes of white flowers. And you can see that the flowers then form the same shaped clusters of small black fruits. The pin, sweet, and sour cherries have flat-topped clusters of white flowers, followed by branched clusters of fruits of various colors. And then, of course, we have the flowering cherries, which we'll talk about more in a minute. Next slide. The other members of the genus Prunus are the plums, the apricots, and the peaches. And I mentioned almonds. We don't have any pictures of those here. Plums and peaches are similarly important in Japan as early flowers that are found. Here we have, among the plums, there are 2 native plums and 2 that are found that are cultivated for their fruit or their flowers. Next slide. So the Japanese or flowering cherries that we think of as Sakura are composed of many different species. Some of them have originated in Japan, others in China, and as Akiko said, they have been prized for centuries and have been cultivated for centuries. And these are 2 of the original species, Prunus seriolata and Prunus speciosa, the Oshima cherry, which originated in China but has long been prized in Japan. These are 2 of several species that are responsible for the hybrids that have become the very popular varieties. Next slide. And the Yoshino cherry, Prunus times yedoensis. This is one of the hybrids, and there are many hybrid formulas for that and many more varieties. And you can see that it is found in many forms. So when cultivated varieties are made, they are developed for particular characteristics, either the drooping, weeping features that you can see on the bottom left, or different colors of flowers, different numbers of petals, all different characteristics, and which gives us a huge diversity of beautiful blossoms that we can see. Yoshino cherry is one of 2 national flowers of Japan, the other being the chrysanthemum. Next slide. So I wanted to run through the annual cycle of Sakura flowers because we'll see that this is very important. Cherry flowers are formed the previous season and they overwinter within the winter twig as buds. So the preformed flowers are there. This is why when you are pruning, never prune until after the plant has flowered or you won't get any flowers. This is true of many members of the rose family. And as we move from left to right in the top row, we can see the early expanding buds in the spring. They then swell, and the next stage, which I haven't shown here, the sepals will begin to pull apart and you'll begin to see the flower parts. And then we get to the elongating buds where the pedicel or flower stalk is beginning to elongate, and then the petals begin to expand in pre-opening. Then we get to the first flowers, which in Japan are called kaika, and then to full flowering or mankai, which is the next stage. The leaves of cherries emerge after the flowers are complete, and the flowers are fleeting, only lasting, sometimes up to 10 days. And we don't think of flowering cherries as having fruit, but all trees that bear flowers have fruit. In this case, many of the flowering cherries produce very sour fruit, so it's not something that we pay much attention to. And of course, as we move then in toward the fall, the leaves turn this beautiful bronzy color, which we enjoy before they fall. Next slide. So in Japan, there is actually a Sakura blooming forecast that is given every year. This is maintained by the Meteorological Agency of Japan, and it is something that signifies how important Hana-mi is to the Japanese people. The Meteorological Survey monitors blooming on designated observation trees that are held at 58 stations across the country, and they monitor their progress in blooming every year. And the forecasts begin to come out in February. And you can imagine that this is very important as people within the country travel to go see the Sakura, but also pilgrims come from around the world. And so the timing is very critical to know in advance. On this forecast, you can see that it will give you the first bloom. And in the top on the right-hand side, we show Sapporo, which is one of the northernmost cities. And here, the flowers have not bloomed yet. This is the 2023 forecast. So we're expecting them on the 16th. First bloom or kaika means that there are 5 to 6 flowers on any given tree. And once it's in full bloom, then it's all the flowers, and that is expected to happen by the 21st. So you can see that there's about a 5 to 7 day lag time between first flowering and full bloom. In Tokyo, of course, flowering is long finished, with an early year this year with first bloom on the 14th of March and full bloom by the 22nd. Next slide. So all of this observation is what botanists term looking at the phenology of the plant. Phenology means the sequence and the timing of various events in the development of an organism. In plants, it means the progression from bud to flower to fruit to leaf out. And Sakura is very important because the flowering dates have been recorded in Japan since the 8th century. And here in particular in Kyoto since 812 AD, and all of this information has been taken from the records of courts and shrines and others who recorded it. The actual meteorological record has only been in existence for about 70 years, but we're able to add all of this information to it. And why is that important? Well, it tells us how the plants are reacting to the climate, and in time, how that changes over time. And you can see in the first upper graph on the right-hand side, how it really does oscillate. 90 days on the left-hand axis is about the 1st of April, and you can see that we go all the way up probably till late May. But the critical date that I wanted to show here was March 26, 2021, on the very right-hand side of the upper graph, which was the earliest flowering date in Kyoto in 1200 years. And that got everyone thinking. There was quite a buzz internationally about, was this a function of climate change? And it really is important to note that flowering dates do oscillate regularly every year. But what we're looking for is there a trend in earlier flowering? And this led to a lot of research that had been going on and continues to go on, using climate simulation models to predict the potential effects of increasing temperatures based on human-induced activities. And one of the things that has shown is that there is a difference in flowering between the cities and in rural areas, where the temperatures in the cities tend to be higher due to heat island effects. And in the bottom graph, you can just see how the temperature in blue is correlated with the flowering time, and the warmer the temperature, the earlier the flowering occurs. However, there's a catch, and that is that Sakura requires a period of cold temperatures to break dormancy. So you can have early flowering when you have a warm spring, but if you've had a warm winter, you might have late flowering because it hasn't been cold enough. There hasn't been enough of a cold period for the plant to break dormancy. So it's a tricky situation that changes all the time, and something that is monitored not only for Sakura, but Sakura is an exemplar in what we call plant watch, monitoring what is happening in many, many different species in the spring so that we can see how the climate is changing. Next slide. So back to Akiko.
Thank you. That was so interesting to hear about the science of Sakura. So now I'm going to talk about the cultural significance of Sakura in Japanese culture, using the ROM's Japanese collection. So as mentioned, it was during the Heian period, about 8 to 1200 years ago, when Sakura gradually became significant and a symbolic flower in Japanese culture, to the degree that a generic term flower or hana meant Sakura automatically in poems. And look at this print. This print was created by Ogata Gekko, who was active around 1900 in the Meiji period. He depicts a scene from the Tale of Genji, a classic literature written around 1000 AD. So here depicted is the 8th chapter of the story, and an encounter between the protagonist Hikaru Genji, the male figure on your right, and one of many princesses that he meets throughout the story. And this was at the imperial court banquet to celebrate cherry blossoms. So as Deb mentioned, Sakura was very important since the 8th to 9th century, and the imperial court held a banquet to celebrate the flowers. And as you can see, the artist Gekko depicted this romantic encounter, and with the sakura and the scattering petals, he successfully dramatized this encounter in this print. And the next print depicts a story back in 1333, 14th century, in which a samurai, Kojima Takanori, that's him, he is writing a poem on a tree, cherry tree, as you can see here. Again, this print was by Gekko, the same artist. And this samurai, he was loyal to the then emperor, and the emperor was forced into exile. And he couldn't meet him, and so he wrote this poem on the cherry tree to show his loyalty to the emperor. And so this story was very popular and handed down for many, many years until Gekko's time, because in Japanese culture, the loyalty to the retainer's loyalty to his laws is a virtue. And perhaps the story became very symbolic because the tree was a cherry tree, not any other tree. So this indicates the symbolic meaning of cherry trees. And also during the warrior ruling periods, Sakura was symbolic for samurai because samurai were expected to terminate their lives whenever, according to the fate happened to the lords or the families. So their capability of accepting death with composure and calmness was somewhat glorified and compared to the ephemeral beauty of Sakura. So the tendency in Japanese culture to see beauty in the transience of life may have been derived from the Buddhist idea of the impermanence of all things, and scattering petals of sakura and other flowers are admired as much as flowers in full bloom. So Hana-fubuki is a term to describe the scattering sakura petals, but it means, literally means flower blizzard, and it's kind of a romantic feeling to Japanese sensitivity. So again, here Hiroshige's print, you can see, the subtle beauty of scattering sakura petals. And again, in this triptych by Gekko, the Meiji artist, this joyful scene of, children playing under the sakura tree is also kind of, the movement and the joyfulness was added by this scattering petals in the wind. And sakura is also considered as a representative flower of Japan. As Deb mentioned, it's considered as a national flower. So, sakura motifs have been used to decorate items for foreign clients too. So this is a ceramic set of coffee sets in Satsuma style, Satsuma ware style, in our collection, donated last year. But this was made in early 20th century in Japan and purchased by an Indian officer who visited Japan in 1947 and handed down to the family who are now living in Canada, so donated to the ROM last year. So this shows the global circulation of sakura motif on Japanese objects. And not only flowers, but trees, sakura trees are used in a variety of ways in Japan. For example, the woodblock to produce woodblock prints that I have been showing are made of sakura trees because sakura is durable and also soft enough to carve fine lines. So this is one example of woodblock to create a book, printed book. And this is just it doesn't correspond, but then it's just a sample image of how the book looks like. So even the texts are carved on the tree, the woodblock. So it's a very fine line as well as in some lines in the pictures as well. So the woodblock must be soft enough but sturdy enough to keep the carving stable to print. So sakura was the perfect material for that purpose. And also sakura tree barks are used to create many things, a box like this. And yes, Deb, you tell us about the sakura bark.
So one of the diagnostic features of cherries is the presence of lenticels, these corky protuberances out of the bark that are actually used in gas exchange, the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen through the bark. And they come in different patterns. On the left, these are both barks from Prunus seriolata. And the bark on the left shows a young branch with smaller lines. And in the older bark on the tree, they've actually elongated. And so you can see you get these beautiful patterns that are raised and, as Akiko will show you, make beautiful objects.
Yes. So craft work using sakura bark is a major industry especially in Akita Prefecture in northern Japan, and they produce tea caddies like these, boxes, and even bags or even coffee mills from the bark. So that's a big thing, bark craft in Akita Prefecture. And also, did you know sakura flowers or leaves are edible too? So as you may know, on your left, this is called sakura mochi. And it's a rice cake with red bean spread paste in it. And they are wrapped with salted sakura leaves. And this is a favorite sweets in the spring season. And you feel, you smell like a very subtle fragrance of the sakura leaves. Very nice. And in the middle, this is called sakura yu or sakura tea. And it is made by steeping pickled sakura flower with the boiling water. And this tea is not as common as green tea in Japan, but because it's sakura and it's a kind of has celebratory nature. So this tea is often served at weddings because, to celebrate. And on the right, these are food using sakura, and these are in my kitchen actually. And this one is a sakura tea with roasted green tea and sakura leaves. And again, if you steep with boiled water, it has a very nice, fragrance of sakura, and my favorite tea when I want to get, relaxed and chilled. And on next to it is a sakura jam, and made of sakura flower and some plum, I think. I haven't tried this yet, but then I will try soon. And the one in front is to make sakura rice. And you just add this mix into when you cook rice in a rice cooker. And I haven't used it yet, but I would expect pink rice like this on the photo with the fragrance of sakura flower. So I'm waiting for an appropriate opportunity to cook it, something to celebrate. I don't know what, but then, it has to be, used during the spring, by the end of spring. And I would like to, show you how sakura is close to Japanese life. And popular use of sakura I introduce is a telegram to inform the result of the entrance exam to universities, which was used in the 1950s to 80s. And because the number of letters used for telegram is limited, and then also people wanted to avoid the direct expression. So the telegram saying sakura saku, meaning cherry blossoms bloom, meaning that this person passed the entrance exam. And sakura chiru, cherry blossoms scatter, means that the entrance exam failed. So again, sakura has been really very, part of Japanese life, as you can see here. So again, now let's turn the mic to Deb.
So the season of Hana-mi is coming to a close in Japan, but it still is thriving around the world. And this is to show that Sakura is not just a Japanese phenomenon. And thankfully, due to the generosity of the Japanese people in sharing their Sakura around the world in cities, you can go on pilgrimage all over the place to see. And I have shown here Sakura in bloom in Stockholm, Sweden, in Bonn, Germany, in many cities of Europe, in Paris, in London, and in many cities in the United States, in Washington, in Philadelphia. And coming closer to home, we come back to Ontario. Next slide. And very soon, the Sakura Watch is on at the Royal Botanical Garden in Burlington. As we mentioned earlier, they were a recipient of many trees as part of the Sakura project sponsored by the Japanese consulate. And you can go and view those. Again, you can see the great oscillation in dates with an early one in 2012 12 of April 4th, but the previous year it was May 11th. So we're predicting again the end of April here. And I would encourage you to go experience Hana-mi in Burlington. And if you're in Toronto, next slide. High Park, the Cherry Blossom Watch is on. I have posted several of the hotlines and tracking sites that are available for the city. The High Park Nature Center does a wonderful job of explaining the various stages in the development of the cherry blossoms. And you can see, just as in Japan, you had people sharing in High Park, you end up with all kinds of people enjoying Hana-mi and even going for a native plant sale in the upper left-hand corner. So if you're in Toronto, and of course, if you're in other cities adjacent Ontario or in Ontario, Ottawa and elsewhere, I'm sure you too can find cherries to view. Next slide. And just maybe the Sakura may inspire you to view not only the flowering cherries, but all the cherries and other trees that Ontario has to offer. And part of my celebration is the completion of the ROM's Field Guide to the Trees of Ontario, which includes all of the species of Prunus that I have told you, but many, many more, both of trees in native places and also throughout the city. So our goal has been that you can view any tree that you might encounter and try to identify it. Next slide.
That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deb. Yeah, and congratulations on the publication. Yeah. So we have a few questions, and I encourage everyone to post any question that you have. So let's start from the first question. Okay, how can we expand the experience of Hana-mi at High Park and other sites here in Ontario by offering the availability of a culturally appropriate celebration and offering of traditional Japanese tea and accompanying treats? Thanks. Okay. P.S. There was only a hot dog vendor in the area of the park last year, and would hope someone may find a way to offer authentic beverage and culinary items to guests enjoying the event. Yes, thank you very much for this suggestion, rather. But as I showed you, Japanese and enjoy, all sorts of eating food and drinks under the cherry blossoms. So there's nothing, no such a thing that authentic, food or tea, the drink. So you can enjoy anything under sakura tree. So, but then it would be really nice if there's, a vendor who offers Japanese green tea and then Japanese sweet. That'd be really great. I hope someone can, do that. Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, so next one, 100 trees in High Park. Where are the rest of the trees? I think this is about the 1959 donations.
Yeah, I think there more trees I think have been planted since then, but the trees are concentrated, particularly in the area around Grenadier Pond and then throughout the park. So 100 trees was the first donation, but there have been more that have been planted since then.
In High Park too, right?
In High Park, I think as well, yes.
Oh, okay, great. So are the trees in High Park fruit bearing?
As I said, I'll be honest, I haven't been out there to look at them after flowering season. They would bear fruit, but not as profusely as other things. So we'll have to look into that more. There are some cherry trees that have probably been cultivated to concentrate on the flowers. But if there are fruit, they're not as significant as the flowers are.
And when around what month, the cherry fruits, you can see? I'm curious.
Cherries tend usually in June, if you can get to them
Sure.
before that. So I would recommend more some of our native cherries and also some of the sweet cherries and other things. The Sakuras are really there for the flowers, but some of the other cherries, and usually I would say June and July. It takes several weeks for them to mature, but you always have to get them before the birds do.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Okay, next question. How far north in Ontario do Japanese cherry trees grow? That's a good question.
Well, I believe we certainly have Japanese cherries in Ottawa, and I'm jumping out on a limb here, and I'd be happy to check up on this, but I have a feeling that there have been some planted in Thunder Bay. So, but mostly Southern Ontario. But if you want to send us an email or add your email address, I will respond to that question.
Great, thank you. Okay, last question, I think. Could you provide some recommendations on where to buy the tea that was mentioned on the Life with Sakura slide in Toronto? That's a very good question. And unfortunately, I don't think you can get it in Toronto because I got it through a small business in the US, which import Japanese things and package in one small box to the clients, the members of the business. And my friend was a member, and then she gave me that tea. So I haven't seen this particular tea with Sakura in Toronto. I will try to find it, but it may be slightly difficult. So maybe you have to order from Japan. And if you are really keen to get it. Yeah. Okay. So I think that was it for the question. Yeah. And the time is right. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And I hope we will see you again in the coming online program. You can see the information from the wrong website, what is coming. Thank you, Deb, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Akiko, and
Thank you.
greetings to all.
Bye.
Bye.